Well, welcome. We'd like to welcome you to our dealer class. Here we are, it's 2014, and it's been a lot of years since we've done education classes, but one thing we have found is that a lot of dealers have been able to stay out of trouble making sure that they're updated and educated every year. So we feel like the education class has been very valuable for dealers, particularly with all the law changes that affect the motor vehicle industry. You know, we're very highly regulated, and it's important for us to make sure we're complying with the laws. They change all the time. Not only in the state of Utah, but also on the federal basis. We're going to spend a little bit of time on some of the new federal changes that are going to be coming during the course of the year. So as we get going, if you have any questions, feel free to ask those even under what we're doing today. So feel free to ask questions. There are no dumb questions. The only dumb question you ask is the one you don't ask, because obviously if you have a question, we need to get that answered for you. So having said that, all of you should have picked up a handout today. Just going to start out by reminding you that a couple of things that we always do at the beginning of our classes, and one is also to let you know that IDS does title and title work for dealers, so title and registration services. Even after all these years we have performed title and registration services, dealers still don't understand that they can come to our offices, both in Ogden and Orem and here in Midvale, that they can get their title work done. So if you have any challenges with title work, be sure to see our gals. Our title offices are typically the best managed title offices in the state. We're usually 1, 2, and 3 with the fewest mistakes, if any. And I know there's a lot of title offices in the state that can't say that. And so if you have need of title questions or you need title processing done, be sure and use our offices. We will remind you that about antitrust and those types of things. We're not here to talk about price fixing or doing those types of things that would get us into trouble with the federal government or the state government. So we're here to learn and be educated, and that antitrust disclosure is on page 3 of your handout. We put a table of contents again in the front. I suggest that you go back and share that information with your owners or your secretaries, title clerks, whomever you feel you need to. Make sure you go back and share this information. It's one thing to come and get the education, but it's what you do with it when you're done. So if you need to go back and implement changes and get those taken care of in your dealership, make sure that you do that. We also remind you about our copyright infringement. For those of you who are using our forms, sometimes people still want to copy our forms, particularly the motor vehicle contract to sale. We ask you not to do that. That's a copyright infringement. Each year at the legislature, we go through a lot of bills. This year, it was very different on Capitol Hill from the standpoint that there weren't a lot of bills that either we took there or other people were shooting at us. We were able to take care of some bills that we made sure didn't pass, but because we have a presence there, otherwise those things would go through and you'd be living with a lot more rules and regulations that you have currently. The one most important thing is, as we lobby on Capitol Hill, and you've known over the last few years that we've had discussions concerning bond increases, because there's an association there, and because of many of you who have talked to legislators on Capitol Hill, that issue did not come up this year. And so hopefully we put that to bed. But based on our research over the last 2 or 3 years that we've been dealing with bond increases, if that ever comes up again, I think we have some solutions that will take place. The changes we've made over the year have resulted in less bond claims out there. And periodically we'll get somebody who doesn't want to follow the rules and there's a claim against their bond, and those things happen. And unfortunately you can't regulate people that want to operate dishonestly. But we do have the rules and laws in place that hopefully will take care of those people when they're not doing it correctly. So thanks to those of you who do know who your legislator is. I put in here, because this is a very important part of what we do with lobbying, and that is to know who your legislator is. And there's starting on page 6, there's a simple 3-step process to know who your legislator is. How many of you know who your legislator is? Raise your hand. You know who you should have a House and Senate member on Capitol Hill. If you don't, get to know them, because those are the people who are going to be voting for you. That's why you elect them. And right now is a good election year, and when you see these flyers and things come to your house about, John Doe running for whatever office for House or Senate, pick up the phone and call them, or go to their website and say, how do you feel about dealer issues? Do you support the business of auto dealerships? Find out who they are. They're regular people just like us. They're farmers, they're school teachers, they're attorneys, but they know very little about our business, and that's what our role is on Capitol Hill, is to inform them and educate them. So starting on page 6, there's a 3-step process. You go to the state's website, and as soon as you click on there, it goes to their home page. If you just scroll clear down to the bottom of the page, it shows you there's a sentence that says, "Who represents me?" You type in your address. Pretty tough. Type in your address, and what comes up is on top of page 4 is your senator and your House of Representative member. And then if you want to find out about them, you just click on their picture and it will tell you exactly who they are. This one happens to be Tim Cosgrove, who is a representative around this area. I put him in because he's our representative here in our business. Okay? And I would strongly suggest you find out who your representative is and who your senator is based on not only your home, but also your business, because they're very interested in what goes on in the business community. If you call them and say, "Hey, I have a business in your district and it deals with, and I'm an auto dealer and I have an issue that I'm concerned about. I want to know what your position is on it." Because many times I'll go to a legislator and they'll say, "Oh, I have a constituent, or I have somebody who called me about that the other day. I'm going to go find out who it is." And I come back and they say, "Oh, do you know so-and-so? He has a dealership at this address." "Oh yeah, I know them very well." Okay. And so that's something that we really value, because you guys are the ones that vote for them. All we are is the educator. You guys need to really find out who your legislators are, because they're not only voting for what goes on in our industry, but what goes on with healthcare, with workers' comp, with all the policies and procedures that happen on the state level that affect all of us personally and in your business. And so you really need to know who they are. So any questions about, so next year when you raise your hand, I want to see the whole room with their hand in the air saying, "Yeah, I know who my guy," it doesn't mean you have to talk to them, but know who they are. So when we send you out an email that says, "Hey, call your legislator and tell them to vote no on Senate Bill 63, or whatever it is," then you can do that, and we'll show exactly how to do that. And it's a simple email that says, Senator Aaron Osman, subject line, "Vote no on Senate Bill 63. And you send it. That's all you need to do, because they don't go and read all the guts and all these things. They get hundreds of emails every day. But if you put it in the subject line, it says that it's a really important feature for auto dealers for this bill not to pass, or to support it, whatever the case is. So at some point we may do a call of action, because maybe next year somebody may propose a bond increase, and we'll have to get your help to do that. Okay? Any questions about that? Okay, moving along, and we're going to move through this fairly fast today, as we always do. If you have questions, feel free to stop me, or write down your questions and send them to me. On page 8, as you know, we had pretty ugly air this past winter. It's all cleared out now, so it's not as in the news as often as it used to be. But there were a lot of clean air bills, a lot of them. There was probably, I would say, 8 or 10 bills just dealing with vehicle emissions. Not one of those bills went through the legislature. Okay? Some of those were duplicates. A senator would want to do a bill and a House member wanted to do a bill, and they said the same thing. So a lot of those did not see the light of day because they did other things. This bill I put in here, House Bill 61, this bill actually passed, and the reason I put this in here is because I'm sure most of you have been around long enough to remember the Cash for Clunkers program that the federal government did. When I first read this bill, that's what came to my mind. Is this a Cash for Clunkers bill? Because what this does is allow the Department of Air Quality to make loans or grants to people to help clean up the air. When I read that, I thought, okay, does that mean I can go get a grant to say, hey, we want every vehicle from 1970 on to be off the road? You know, what Cash for Clunkers did, for example. We wanted to make sure that it didn't do the same thing. So we met with the sponsor of this, which there were many sponsors and co-sponsors of this bill. This focus was mostly on smaller stuff like small engines, you know, like your lawnmowers and snow throwers and all that kind of stuff. That's what this bill focused on. And so that we can do things to help start cleaning up the environment. And I'm all for cleaning up the environment, but we need to do it in a methodical and a smart way to do that. So we made sure that this did not have similarities to Cash for Clunkers, which it did. So this bill actually passed, and wanted to let you know that this bill could have had some serious implications for them, but we kept those kinds of things out of this bill. Okay? Bottom of page 8 is House Bill 62. It's RV title amendments. If any of you are dealing or have somebody trade in a truck camper, it's always been hard to determine what the ownership is. Okay? Particularly for the new guys that are selling them. They had an MSO from the manufacturer, and because Utah did not title truck campers, they just give that to the customer, throw it away, and you'd go through and do your registration. But if you had a lien on it, you had to file it through a very cumbersome UCC filing. and that was not easy to use. So to solve that problem, we began this year starting in January, and you'll see implementation dates at the bottom of each bill. Starting January 1st of 2015, there will now be a title for truck campers. Okay, and it's only for 2015 models and newer. But if you have one traded in and you want to title it and have a title for it so you can show a title transaction or to be able to do a lien process, a dealer or the owner can apply for a truck camper even though it's not a 2015 model. So something to be aware of if that comes into your dealership. How many of you know what a park model is? Anybody know what a park model is? A park model is kind of like a travel trailer, but it doesn't really travel up and down the road. You know, when you see a construction site and you see these, 10 by whatever units that are out there, they're kind of considered like a park model, but some park models are like a travel trailer inside where somebody will take them to the deer camp in the fall and up north in the winter, and they're only limited to 400 square feet. Well, we did exactly the same thing with the title for them that we did with truck campers. Okay, so that's all that bill does. Both of those, by the way, will now be charged an age-based fee where they were not before. So if you took a truck camper in and you sold it, age-based fees and registration has always been there, but age-based fees will now be collected on those as well. Okay? Every year we have to have a vanity plate. We only had one this year, surprise, surprise. But the name is a mouthful. It counts for about fourth. If you look on the top line of that, it's called the National Professional Men's Basketball Team Support of Women and Children's Issues plate. Now, I sure hope that they don't put that all on the plate because there's not room, right? But that will be a new plate. There's a $25 fee for somebody to be able to have that plate. It makes a restricted account where that money goes into support women and children's issues is what it's for, and that was the new vanity plate that we have. Excuse me, I'm not sure where we're going to go from the rest of the vanity plates, but we always have a new one every year, it seems like. So. And that will go into effect May 12th, by the way. And some people ask, well, why is May 12th such a magical date? May 12th is actually 60 days following the session, so if a bill doesn't have an implementation date, it automatically goes into effect. So you'll hear Sunday night on the news that Monday morning, May 12th, that there are going to be 287 new laws on the books. That's why, is because of that May 12th date. So now you'll know something that your neighbor won't know while you're watching TV Sunday night. Okay. Display of license plates. This was an interesting bill where this started out and totally morphed into something different, but this had to do with the plastic covers that some people are putting on their license plate. They're typically clear, and as they get older and scratch, you can't see the numbers and the decals. This says that you can still have those on there because he wanted to totally preclude it, but he said as long as you can still have them, as long as you can see the vehicle in daylight hours at 100 feet. You can have a cover over your license plate. It has to be clear, it can't be colored, so you can have those accessories on there. The other thing that it put in here, though, is it put a provision in here that if the vehicle was not originally designed or manufactured to hold a front license plate on it, you do not have to have the front plate on those types of vehicles. So if you're driving a Maserati or, I don't know, whatever, I don't know what doesn't have manufacturer has for front plates, but they are now exempt, so that's going to be few and far between, but there now is a provision for those probably specialty cars that aren't manufactured to hold a license plate on the front. Okay. House Bill 314 on page 10 is the vehicle immobilization and impound amendments. This is another, we always have impound bills every year. This one had to do with some things that were going out on the community. Two issues. One is called vehicle immobilizer. That's where they boot your car. And there's usually, if you get your car booted and they come to take it off, there's a fee to do that. But if they boot it and haul it away, they can't charge you for both. They can't charge a booting fee and a haul away fee. Okay? So it would cover a charge for storage and booting. It has to all be combined into one. The other thing that came into play was a vehicle that was being held in evidence. So if you had a vehicle that was being held in the course of a crime and a city or a municipality or a county or a state was holding that for evidence for a hearing, then they cannot charge you storage for those vehicles. So you as a lien holder, if your vehicle's sitting there, they cannot charge it if it's in an evidence-based thing. Okay? Over the page to page 11. Energy efficient vehicle tax credits. I know a lot of you don't sell new cars, but some people take our classes do. This is a change for the types of vehicles that meet certain air quality standards. The past credit was $605. So if I go buy a fuel efficient vehicle when I buy it new, it got a $605 tax credit. That tax credit was now changed to $1,500. So they get a higher tax credit for when they do that. And I would also say that it looks like there's going to be more and more issues with fuel efficient vehicles. So if you're not dealing in fuel efficient vehicles, I suspect when you have an opportunity, you should probably check on those, because we're going to see more and more of those in the marketplace, particularly on the used side. Bottom of page 11 is off-highway vehicle amendments. This has to do with the side-by-side vehicles. Remember, years past, they always said that an ATV, you could actually make a street legal ATVs and put different types of tires and mirrors and stuff to make it street legal. There was no provision in the law that allowed for the new side-by-sides that you've all seen out there. They're real expensive and they look really fun, but nobody can afford them, right? So the side-by-sides can now be made street legal and can be used on certain highways, and all the same parameters fall for them as an ATV. Over the page to page 12 is the uninsured motorist provision. This has to do where a peace officer seizes a vehicle because somebody doesn't follow in having or being able to verify that they have insurance. Now, the database should show that, but if the database makes a mistake or the officer makes a mistake and your vehicle is impounded, then there's a way for you to apply through a hearing process to have that impound paid for by a restricted fund of the state. So if the state makes the problem, they've created a fund to put money in that if it's done improperly, that you can have restitution for that. So if you got it impounded and you got charged the towing and storage and it's $150, you can actually apply to have that money reimbursed to you. So that was by a senator up in Cache Valley that passed that bill, or sponsored that bill. Okay. Over the page to page 13 is a background check amendments. This has to do with criminal histories, and all of you know when you hire a salesman or a salesperson that they do a criminal background history to see if they've met certain criteria, if they've had past motor vehicle offenses, if they've had drug violations, child molestations, and all those kinds of things. One thing about those types of reports that will change based on this legislation is that only the convictions will show in there. So if somebody was charged with something, typically that rap sheet would show charged with motor vehicle convictions or whatever the case may be. In this case, it will not show anything that is not a conviction. So my advice to you is when you do hire salespeople, make sure you know their history and who you're hiring, and make sure you do a thorough check with that. We've had several situations where a dealer has said, well, gee, I want to give this guy an extra chance, and he has the guy fill out the paperwork. It's all signed by the general manager and goes to a hearing down at the tax commission. Well, lo and behold, when they go through the tax commission and there's the background check, it says, well, you were doing this and this and this, and you have on your record, and the dealer's going, I didn't know he had all that. He says, no, hearing stopped, we're not doing this. So make sure you're well aware of who you're hiring, because we don't need those types of people in our dealerships selling to the consumers that you want to develop that relationship. So a little heads up on that one. Okay, over on page 14, these are bills that we monitored or changed or killed. I thought it was important noting, and most of you are going to say House Bill 54, New Automobile Franchise Act amendments. Well, how does that affect me? This was actually a bill sponsored by a representative out in West Valley City, and he wanted to take all the restrictions off the establishment of a new car dealership. As you know, there are certain parameters that a new car dealership can't be set up within a certain number of miles. And they wanted to eliminate all that process, hoping that a new car dealership would relocate out in West Valley City or in the west side of the valley. Well, obviously the new car dealers didn't like that. We negotiated that with not only our RV association, but the new car association, and said, this is something that we don't want. Well, the bill did not go forward, but the reason I put this in here is because it started a very serious dialogue with many of the mayors and city council members, particularly on the west side of Salt Lake Valley. And the issue came as they're looking for revenue out there. That was the whole point of why they were trying to pass this legislation. And I said, you guys are missing a big chunk of revenue out there. And they're going, what do you mean? I said, last year we passed a bill that said anybody who sells a vehicle, their name has to be on a title. And I go through and explain to them on how some people will buy somebody's car and sell it to somebody else without their name appearing on the title. I said, that's why we passed this law, because you have a sale, there's no documentation, there's no sales tax, there's no income tax, all of that stuff is not paid, and your city suffers for that. And I'll tell you what, I had a lot of wide-eyed city council and mayor people from the west side of this valley saying, well, we need to do something about that. So this summer we're going to meet with each one of them, probably early summer, probably end of May, 1st of June, and we're going to meet with them so that we can start some enforcement of these guys who are out there curbing cars and get their city people to enforce that, because they can now see that when a citation is written, that money can come to their jurisdiction for whoever wrote that ticket. best thing I told him to do is said, stop doing citations on people with their weeds too tall and write them for people who are selling cars, because your revenue is going to be much, much greater than somebody who's going to pay a fine because your weeds are too tall. Okay? Let's focus on the right problems that you have in your city. Okay? The bottom in HB 400 is a bill that didn't pass, and we killed that bill along with the insurance industry. And what this bill did is, if I actually put the actual language in here, they wanted to change the definition of a non-repairable vehicle. Remember, we implemented a non-repairable vehicle definition last year. But they wanted to change this, that the cost of repairing the physical or mechanical damage to the vehicle exceeds 100% or more of the current retail cost of the vehicle as established by any published used car guide. Now, if you read that a couple times, you're going to go, that dog don't hunt. That doesn't work, okay? So the question becomes, is there an amount? Should there be an excess amount that says, should it be 120%? Should it be 150%? Should there be an amount? So what's going to happen with this is, this subject of salvage and non-repairable vehicles is probably going to be discussed in what's called the interim study. The legislature meets during the off months of the legislature. About 6 of the months during the year, they meet and discuss bills. So you'll have a joint meeting of House and Senate Transportation Committee members. This will be a subject. We are bringing in, the first part of next month, all the insurance companies, all the salvage auctions, all of the regular wholesale auctions, the Motor Vehicle Enforcement Division. We're going to have a little powwow about salvage. If any of you have any issues with salvage, I need to know what they are. If you would like to see some changes, this is our opportunity where the door is open and we need to make changes that we need to make. For example, somebody has suggested that in order to make a good, reliable chain of ownership for salvage or non-repairable vehicles, that vehicle should never be sold without that person being on the title. What that means, what I'm saying is, should the dealer have to have his name on a salvage certificate, even though, we still have to track mileage and do all those other things. So should we require a title to be processed for every salvage vehicle? That's a question that's come up. I don't know the answer to that. Some people are saying, yeah, it should. Others saying, why should I have to pay $5 for a salvage title? Well, if it helps us in the tracking and these salvage vehicles keep showing up back on our doorstep, if that's a small price to pay, maybe it's worthwhile. That's the discussion we're going to have next month with all the industry partners, and then we'll bring that to you in the form through our newsletters and our website about what those discussions are. And probably next year, or even during the interim study this summer, there will be a bill that says we're making the following changes. It might be a definition to non-repairable vehicle. It might be something else. Okay? Comment?
The only thing I would like to say that is salvage body shop, when they're buying their car from the
Salvage auction.
Salvage auction, now they are repairing the car. That's when their name should go to it, because then they can retrack to see who fixed it.
Right. And to me, there should be no, my personal opinion is there should be no open title issues with salvage vehicles or non-repaired vehicles. There needs to be a really good, clean paper trail. And I think that's helpful in the long run. I had a dealer call me the other day and he said, this title has a clean title, or this vehicle has a clean title, but it came from an insurance company. I know it's been wrecked, but it has a clean title. Can I sell it with clean title? What's the answer? Can he? Darn right you can. If I have a clean title, it's clean coming in, it's clean going out. Who cares where I bought it from, right? So technically I can sell that and I don't have to disclose it's salvage. However, probably the first thing I would do is probably go to Carfax or some other entity and find out if it had a title history. Because if I do sell it clean, that still may come back and bite me, because maybe it was branded before, now somewhere along the way somebody got a cleaned up title. So you got to do your due diligence with salvage and making sure that that's taken care of. Yep.
Just about a week ago, I bought a car. The clean title. The Carfax, it showed up total loss.
Right. Had a clean title though, huh?
Has a clean title.
Yeah.
But according to the auction rules, I had to announce total loss.
Right. Yeah, because there's some history somewhere. That's why they do car history checks at the auction, because if it does show a history, they're going to announce it even if it has a clean title. So that's a typical. Before you turn to page 14, I missed the ones in the middle of the page about consumer lending amendments. That was a bill that we didn't like on some concerning buy here, pay here dealers. I loved House Bill 281, the motorcycle amendments. This is a bill to allow what people do in California, and that's to ride their motorcycles between the lanes. That drive you nuts when you go to California and all of a sudden you jump out of your seat because some bullet bike went by you between two cars. Somebody wanted to pass a bill to do that, okay, but did not pass, okay? Temporary permits were discussed. That was never introduced. We headed that off at the pass before it ever came up. And again, there were a lot of emission bills that did not pass. So, and then that concludes all the bills that were on Capitol Hill. So we didn't have a lot as far as bills we took there to pass, because we didn't hear from you guys as far as, hey, we need to fix this. There wasn't any kind of fix-it things except for that RV title issue. And so I love it when we can go watch bills and we can kill them, because it's a lot easier to kill a bill than it is to pass one. Okay? And usually they're stupid things that you need to, that just doesn't make sense for our business community. And so I need to know those kinds of things. If you're having problems with certain things, my philosophy is, if you're going to pass one, you should repeal two. Okay? That's what they should do on Capitol Hill until they get this government intervention, all this government stuff, and do things that make sense. So those are all the bills. Now, that doesn't give the total number. We monitored probably 65, 70 bills that affected our industry one way or another. Sometimes those affected workers' comp, sometimes those affected health insurance or other issues. But this year we didn't have a lot of major changes like we've had in years past. One thing I put on the list here also is on page 15, and this has to do with internet sales. I've had several calls from attorneys concerning internet sales and people who are selling cars through the internet. The question becomes, if I sell a vehicle to someone in Colorado and they have a problem, which state has jurisdiction? Best answer I've heard so far is whatever your contract says. Okay? So there are two issues here, two suggestions here, and I put two tips here. Tip number one is, when you sell a vehicle to somebody out of state or wherever you're selling it to, there's on the motor vehicle contract, there's a place that says, I accept this deal. Okay? You never sign that line until you send the paperwork to them and have them sign and send it back to you. Okay? Because let's say you did sign that and you sent it, I'm in Colorado, and you send it to me and you sign saying I agree to it. Boy, it'd sure be easy for me to write in something under other terms agreed to, and now I got a contract that you've already approved. So why in the world would you want to do that? Send the contract without your approval. And some of the supporting document forms also have a place to have approval by the dealership to consummate the sale. Make sure you never sign those until the paperwork comes back for you. I know it's one more step in paperwork back and forth, but it's well worth the cost to cover yourself. Okay? When it comes back, go through the contract, make sure they haven't changed something, because it's very easy for them to change things these days. Check those things out. And the second tip in this is we are putting an additional condition on the back of the motor vehicle contract. So we're going to have a change in the motor vehicle contract to sale, but it will not affect the front of it, so you don't have to get it reprogrammed. But on the back, I'm just waiting for the language to come from the attorney, but basically it says that any legal action that takes place against the dealer concerning this sale will take place in the state of Utah, and that all Utah laws will apply, both state and federal. So if you sell a car to a guy in New Jersey, you don't have to go to New Jersey or hire a New Jersey lawyer to defend yourself. So that will be added to our motor vehicle contract on our next printing. You can still use your old ones. You could even write that on the back or some language to that effect if you want. If you're using our motor vehicle contract to sale, that's why it's important for you to use ours. That's why it's copyrighted, because we put all these provisions on there to make sure you're still protected. I see many times that contract is 4, 5, 6 years old and they're not compliant anymore. So that's why we have this copyrighted motor vehicle contract to sale. So please don't print those yourself. But if you have your own version, that's fine. Make your own version, but make sure some kind of language is on there if you're doing internet sales. Probably by the end of this month, because we're going to do a printing now. We're still going to be selling our old forms because some people don't do internet sales, and we'll sell those to them. But if you're doing internet sales, it will be on the, probably by the end of this month, we'll have a new supply of those.
So that's really for internet sales?
That's correct, yeah. And it is, but what if you have somebody come here from, let's say they're visiting here from California and they blow up their car, and they come into your dealership, and they drive back to California, it blows up in Las Vegas? What law applies? If it's not stated in there, it could apply to Nevada or California or whatever. So it's not just internet sales. It basically ties everything that you do to the state of Utah. So eventually that'll be on every contract and you won't have to worry about that. Okay, other questions? On the remaining pages, I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. We're making good on time. Page 16, this is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. This is federal stuff. This comes from our national association. If you're a member of our association, You get a publication from the National Association. They email a legal brief out every month. This is an example of the legal brief that lets you know what's going on in Washington, D.C. There's a ton of stuff, okay? The first one is a proposed rulemaking regarding debt collection practices. If you're a buy here, pay here dealer, you know that there's a lot of different things you have to do if you're doing buy here, pay here. This is a process in which they're looking at rewriting the rules for that. Our National Association has responded to suggestions and different things, which you can see on NIADA's website, and I suggest that you go look for that if you are doing buy here, pay here. I put on here also under the Department of Justice, the second paragraph talks about dealers who were charged with inflating sales prices, down payments, and interest rates without tying the increase to a meaningful difference in customer credit. You need to make sure when you're advertising and doing those kinds of things that they comply with truth in the lending process and that everything is in there. Also in this, it talks about GPS trackers. Can you just put one on without your customer knowing? The answer is no. State law even defines that. So if you're putting a tracking device on your buy here, pay here cars, you got to let the customer know that they have it on there. Okay? Under the EPA, this was an interesting case. I thought it might be interesting. This has to do with an importer who imported 24,000 motorcycles, failed to have the proper emission stuff on there, and he was cited $120,000 and had to destroy all the vehicles that were remaining in his inventory. So make sure you're doing everything correctly, particularly if you're doing any kind of importing. Under the Federal Trade Commission, this also has to do with advertising. And the one thing I would highly suggest, every year for the last 5 years, we have put a copy of the advertising regulations of both the rules and the code in your packets. I suggest you go back and review that because I asked the Motor Vehicle Enforcement Division, what's the #1 problem you're having right now? It's still advertising. Dealers are not doing their advertising properly. And so go back and make sure you're following the advertising regs. This kind of has to do with that. If you look in those points of interest down there, it says these are different allegation violations. So offering zero do-it signing. Our advertising law addresses that. Zero means zero. If you say no money down, I can leave my checkbook and every amount of money in my pocket at home and I can walk out with that car. If it says no money down, make sure you're doing that. And this is a federal case under the Federal Trade Commission that was prosecuting this one. Offering a vehicle without disclosing all the terms in the truth in the lending. Are you just showing payments? Are you showing the interest rate? Are you showing all the terms that are required under Reg Z or Reg M, depending on whether a lease or a sale? Okay. Number 4 was very interesting. That is showing an advertisement that says $99 a month will buy this car. Well, some of these people are out there putting $99 buys, but they don't put down that, by the way, the payment changes in month 3. Or that there's a balloon payment. It's going to be $99 a month for 120 months, but at the end you got a $10,000 balloon payment. You have to disclose that, or the customer's going to get all their money back and probably keep the car too. Okay? And then number 6 is prizes for consumers, where they offer prizes and drawings for people that didn't get that. Our advertising regulations address that. If you're advertising, come in for a free case of Diet Coke, you better be giving them a free case of Diet Coke if they walk in the door. That can't be conditioned on anything. So again, my suggestion is that you go back and read the advertising regulations for the state of Utah for all your advertising. Then further over on page 18, it actually shows an implied warranty issue where on the paragraph B down there it talks about Nissan showing a Frontier where they showed a truck rescuing a dune buggy, pulling it up a hill. And the FTC said, that's not going to work. We know that a Frontier won't pull a dune buggy up a sand hill. So don't show us things that aren't really true. So this has to do with implied warranty. Remember, in years past, we've talked about implied warranty. Anything you say about a vehicle is an implied warranty, and you need to make sure you're using that implied warranty, no implied warranty form. Not just the buyer's guide, but also the implied warranty form as well. That's what this addresses. So if a guy comes in and says, well, this truck pulled my boat up Parley's Canyon, the little half-ton truck, and you say, oh, sure, it's got a 350 in it, or whatever the case may be, right? If it doesn't pull it up, can he bring it back? Well, you can sure try, but if you have an implied warranty issue, it doesn't matter whether you said it will pull it up or not, you're going to be covered. And that's under the Department of Commerce, not under motor vehicle, okay? So you need to make sure on your implied warranty stuff. I'm going to remind you about recall notices. If any of you want to get recall notices, the website is there on your page. You can look that up. The question has become in Congress if there's a recall notice, should somebody be allowed to sell a vehicle with a recall outstanding on it? And recalls are a lot in the news right now. If you read today's paper, there's Toyota and GM that are being hit with hundreds of recalls, millions of recalls that are now costing them money, and this subject is going to come up again in Congress, trust me. It will be there again. And that's why we have a national association, so that we can go through this stuff. I am going to skip over a couple things and let you read those. I'm going to go to top of page 20, since we have a number of military people here in our community. This is a bill that is being proposed right now in Congress that allows veterans some government assistance, that from $18,900 to $30,000 they can get a government assistance if they have to replace a vehicle because the vehicle was destroyed in a disaster and so forth. Now you may say, well, we haven't had any disasters out here, but what if there was flooding in North Carolina and the guy gets transferred to Hill? He may be buying a car to replace a car that happened back in North Carolina. So it's not state specific. This is something that the federal government is working on, and we'll keep you up to date on that. Okay, let's see. Over on page 21, on HR 2414, this is a black box Privacy Protection Act. And you say, well, black boxes, I thought they were just on airplanes. No, they're on cars too. Okay, and the black body is the event data recorder. That does things like will register the speed, it registers if the seatbelt was used, whether the brakes were applied, those sorts of things. This proposed legislation is such that is a privacy protection issue that says if you have a black box, who has access to the black box information? In our state, we passed, I think it was 2 years ago, we passed a similar piece of legislation on a state level that said that information is protected, that only law enforcement, under certain conditions of courts and so forth, is that information available. So they're now trying to do that on a federal level, but we're all protected there. Not going to go through the appropriation stuff. The very last page talks about the letter from NIDA deals with this Consumer Financial Protection Bureau issues and buy here, pay here issues, and I'll let you read that on your own. Okay, who has questions for me? We got to the end pretty quick. Okay, and I knew that was going to be the case this year. So does anybody have any specific questions of areas we haven't covered? The last thing I will mention is a couple of things. One is, as soon as you complete your class, pay your money and so forth, your education will be registered with Motor Vehicle Enforcement Division. And they will have that on there, so when you send in your renewal stuff, it should already be on the system. If you have a problem with that, we haven't had any problems in the past, but if you do, make sure you call Shannon out here, my administrative assistant. She can take care of that for you. So don't call and leave a message on my phone, because I'm usually out meet with some government somewhere. Okay. Let's see. Anybody have any questions? Life is good. Yes? We've seen a lot of good things happen in the auto industry over the last few years, and we hope that it'll continue to grow. And the most important thing I can reiterate again is this is an election year. Make sure you get involved in knowing who the people you're voting for, or your neighbors are voting for, meet your criteria and what you want to do as a business owner and as an individual. Okay? If not, I wish you well, and if you have any questions, send them to us. You're welcome to come up and see me after the classes, and we hope you have a good day. Thanks for being here.